Maria had been working in the tall glass building for almost 7 years. Every morning, before the sun had fully risen, she would put on her plain uniform, tie her hair back neatly, and step into the same lobby that others walked through with designer suits, shining shoes, and expensive watches. To them, she was just the cleaning lady. To Maria, it was her job, her way of earning an honest living, and she took pride in it. When she walked through the hallways, few people noticed her. Some didn't even bother to say hello. Others would nod politely, but their eyes always carried that look of superiority, as if her presence hardly mattered. Maria didn't mind, at least, not on the surface. She kept her face calm, her smile polite, and her hands busy. But deep inside, she noticed everything. The way people spoke when they thought she wasn't listening. The way laughter sometimes followed her as she passed. The way her hard work was taken for granted. As if clean floors and polished tables appeared magically every morning. She moved quietly from one office to another, carrying her mop, her cloth, and her cleaning cart. Every desk she wiped, every floor she polished. She did it carefully, almost lovingly. She believed that no work was small if done with honesty. Yet, what hurt her sometimes was the way people judged her by her job. They did not know her story, her struggles, or her past. They only saw her uniform. Maria had always been good at observing people. While dusting the boardroom, she would overhear snippets of conversations, plans, arguments, financial talks. She never interrupted, never reacted. She just worked in silence, her presence blending into the background. But her sharp mind absorbed every word, every detail. She could tell which executive was hardworking and which one only pretended. She noticed the careless spending, the arrogance, and the tiny cracks in the company's culture. No one knew that Maria understood more about the company than they imagined. Her day usually began at 5 in the morning. She would ride the bus across town, sitting quietly by the window, lost in her thoughts. Sometimes she thought about her late husband, sometimes about her grown-up children who lived in another city. Life had not been kind to her, but she had learned to survive with dignity. By the time she reached the office, the building would still be half asleep. Security guards would greet her with a smile, for they were the only ones who treated her like a friend. She would unlock her cart and start cleaning before the first rush of employees arrived. Maria had a rhythm to her work. She knew exactly how long it would take to clean the lobby, which office needed extra care, and which executives were careless enough to leave coffee stains on the conference table. She even knew who stayed late in the office just by the mess they left behind. Her life was a series of small routines, yet she carried them out with dedication. Still, she was not blind to the way people treated her. Some of the younger employees whispered and giggled when she passed by. They called her the Invisible Lady, thinking she could not hear. Others mocked her old shoes or her wrinkled hands. A few executives acted as if she was in their way, shooing her out of rooms when they wanted to talk privately. Every insult cut deep, but Maria never showed it. She simply lowered her eyes and kept working. There were also moments of kindness, rare but precious. Once a young intern had held the door open for her. Another time, a receptionist offered her tea on a cold morning. But such gestures were exceptions, not the rule. For most people in that building, Maria was just part of the furniture. Someone who cleaned up after them, not someone worthy of respect. Yet Maria had something none of them knew: patience. She carried her past like a secret treasure. She knew who she was and where she came from. Life had taught her resilience. Even as they ridiculed her, she reminded herself that storms never lasted forever. She kept her head down, worked hard, and waited. She didn't know for what, but deep inside, she felt that her story wasn't going to end with just mops and buckets. Something bigger was waiting. On the surface, her life looked ordinary. A cleaning lady moving silently through a corporate building. But behind her quiet eyes was a woman who had seen struggle, who had once lived a very different life, and who carried within her a strength that no one could see. To the employees and the CEO, Maria was invisible. But Maria knew one day they would finally see her not as a cleaner, not as someone to mock, but as someone who mattered. And so, her ordinary beginning continued, day after day, until the moment arrived when the world inside that glass building would turn upside down. Asterisk. The first time Maria noticed the mockery, it was not loud or obvious. It began with whispers. She had just stepped into the boardroom with her cleaning cart, carrying her bucket and cloth as always. A few young executives were leaning back in their chairs, waiting for the meeting to begin. One of them smirked as she bent down to wipe the glass table. "Careful," he whispered to another. "Don't slip on the shine. She might polish us right out of the room." They chuckled quietly, thinking Maria couldn't hear. But Maria heard everything. Her ears were trained to pick up the smallest sounds, though she pretended not to at first. She told herself it didn't matter. People laugh at what they don't understand, she thought. But over time, the jokes grew sharper, louder, and harder to ignore. They mocked her shoes, her uniform, even the way she carried herself. One executive made a show of holding his nose when she walked by with the mop, though there was no smell at all alone, the scent of lemon polish she carefully used. Another once said, "Imagine spending your whole life scrubbing floors. That must be her big achievement." The group burst out laughing, their voices echoing against the boardroom walls. Maria kept her head down. She did not let her eyes meet theirs. On the outside, she looked calm, even indifferent. But inside, each word was like a stone thrown at her dignity. She could have spoken up. She had enough wisdom and courage to defend herself, but she chose silence. She knew something none of them knew. And sometimes silence is not weakness. Sometimes it is strength waiting for the right moment. The CEO, however, was the worst of all. Unlike the others, he did not try to hide his mockery. He believed that power gave him the right to treat people however he pleased. One morning, when Maria was dusting the edge of the boardroom before a meeting, he walked in with his usual air of arrogance. Instead of greeting her or even ignoring her, he pointed at her broom and said loudly to his colleagues, "Look at this. Even our cleaning lady attends more meetings than half of you." The room exploded with laughter. The joke wasn't funny, but no one dared to stay quiet in front of the CEO. Maria felt her cheeks burn, though she kept her eyes lowered. She wanted to disappear, to sink into the floor she had just polished. She could feel every laugh stabbing her pride. She told herself to breathe, to keep calm. It wasn't the first time people mocked her. Life had taught her that cruelty often wears expensive suits. But what made it harder was knowing that the CEO, the man who was supposed to lead with wisdom, was encouraging this behavior. If the leader laughed at her, why wouldn't the others follow? The cruelty did not end there. Sometimes they mocked her when she wasn't even in the room. Maria would enter after a meeting and find drawings on the whiteboard a stick figure with a mop, labeled Queen of the Brooms. Once, she overheard two executives betting on whether she could even read the papers left on the table. They didn't know Maria could not only read them, but also understand every number, every chart, every careless decision scribbled in the margins. One day, the CEO took it too far. Maria was finishing her cleaning when he walked in with a group of foreign investors. Instead of waiting for her to finish, he waved his hand dismissively and said, "Don't mind her, she's just part of the furniture." The investors gave awkward smiles, unsure how to react. Maria felt her throat tighten. Part of the furniture. Was that all they thought of her? A chair, a table, something to use and ignore. She walked out of the boardroom that day with heavy steps. Her mop felt heavier than ever. She sat quietly in the janitor's closet, her hands trembling. She had endured many things in life, but the constant ridicule was beginning to eat away at her patience. Still, she reminded herself, storms don't last forever. And sometimes, storms clear the sky for something new. Maria looked into the mirror in that small closet. Her face was tired, lined with years of struggle, but her eyes still burned with determination. She whispered to herself, "They think they know me. They don't. One day, they will." And so, while the executives and the CEO laughed, mocking the woman who cleaned their floors, Maria stayed silent. She gathered their words like fuel, each insult becoming a spark inside her. She knew that silence could be mistaken for weakness. But she also knew the truth. Silence can also be a sword, waiting for the right moment to strike. They had no idea that the woman they mocked, the one they treated as invisible, held a secret that could shatter their laughter in an instant. The cruel mockery would not last forever. The day of revelation was coming in when it arrived. The boardroom would never be the same again. Maria had always been a quiet worker. To many, her silence looked like shyness or weakness. But in truth, it was her greatest strength. While others filled the office with noise, arguments, laughter, gossip, Maria listened. She moved silently, yet her mind was wide awake, absorbing every detail around her. Day after day, as she dusted shelves and polished tables, she became a silent witness to the company's secrets. She saw things no one else paid attention to. She noticed the coffee cups left behind by nervous managers, shaking hands, leaving stains on papers after stressful meetings. She noticed the expensive pens executives used to sign deals, only to carelessly toss them aside when the ink ran out. She noticed the way voices lowered when the conversation was about money, power, or scandal. Maria never interrupted. She never revealed that she understood what was being said. Everyone assumed she was uneducated, unable to make sense of their business terms. But they were wrong. Behind her calm eyes lived the sharp memory of a woman who had once studied numbers, contracts, and negotiations far more carefully than any of them imagined. She noticed the company's habits. Some executives were hardworking, staying late into the night, their desks stacked with files. Others were lazy, leaving early but pretending they had important meetings outside. She noticed which employees whispered to the CEO to gain favor, and which ones rolled their eyes the moment his back was turned. She knew who carried the weight of the company, and who only carried their pride. What fascinated Maria most were the small cracks in the system, things invisible to others. Once, while wiping a desk, she saw a forgotten financial report. The numbers didn't add up. Millions were being wasted on unnecessary projects. Another time, she overheard two executives arguing about bonuses while junior employees hadn't been paid on time. She pieced the puzzle together quietly, like someone stitching a quilt in the dark dot. No one realized that the cleaning lady knew the company better than most of the board members. While they saw her as invisible, she had the perfect view of everything. Her invisibility was her power. People forgot she was in the room, and so they spoke freely, revealing truths they wouldn't even admit to their colleagues. Maria stored those truths in her memory, layer after layer, like a chest of hidden treasures. Sometimes, while cleaning the boardroom late at night, she would sit for a moment and look at the long table where decisions were made. She imagined how it would feel to sit there, not as a servant, but as a leader. She remembered her husband, how he had once told her that power wasn't in titles, but in wisdom. She smiled to herself, thinking how little these executives understood about true leadership. But there were moments when Maria's patience was tested. Once, she overheard two senior managers laughing about how easy it was to manipulate the CEO. He only cares about appearances. One said, as long as he looks powerful, he doesn't notice the holes we dig under him. They laughed loudly, pouring themselves drinks from the minibar. Maria, mopping quietly in the corner, wondered how blind a leader could be to not see betrayal in his own circle. Another time, She noticed how the CEO would boast about the company's success to investors, even though she had already seen papers showing heavy losses. The lies rolled off his tongue smoothly, and the investors nodded, convinced. Maria wiped the table slowly, her mind whispering, "Truth cannot stay hidden forever." Her silence gave her a strange kind of authority. She knew secrets the employees didn't know about each other. She saw the truth behind fake smiles, the greed hidden in casual jokes, the fear behind confident speeches. It was almost as if the building itself spoke to her, revealing its flaws through careless hands and careless words. Yet Maria never judged too quickly. She understood human weakness. She had lived long enough to know that greed, arrogance, and cruelty often came from fear. What hurt her most, however, was the lack of respect. Not one of these people saw her as equal. They laughed at her shoes, but never realized she noticed their cracked morals. They mocked her uniform, but never realized she wore dignity like armor. In her silence, Maria carried a storm. She had no plans yet, no clear path. But each observation was like a thread being woven into a larger pattern. She felt, deep inside, that everything she saw and everything she endured was leading somewhere. One day, all the whispers, all the secrets, all the cruel jokes, they would collide. And when that day came, Maria would no longer be the silent observer. For now, she continued her work with steady hands, polishing the glass walls that reflected the city lights, sweeping the floors that carried the footsteps of arrogant men, and wiping the tables where power was abused. She blended into the background, invisible yet all-seeing. They believed they mocked a powerless woman. But in truth, they were mocking someone who knew them better than they knew themselves. Maria's silence was not weakness. It was preparation. And soon, the boardroom that echoed with laughter at her expense would echo with something very different: truth, power, and justice. For years, Maria let the world believe she was nothing more than a cleaning lady. She wore her plain uniform like a disguise, and she never corrected those who dismissed her. But behind her quiet eyes was a history no one in the company could have imagined. The truth was hidden, waiting. Like a flame under ashes, long before she picked up a mop in that glass building, Maria had lived a very different life. She was not always invisible. She had once been the wife of Daniel Alvarez, the founder of the company everyone worshipped. Daniel had started the firm from nothing, working late nights at their kitchen table, scribbling plans while Maria brewed coffee to keep him awake. She wasn't just a bystander in those early days. She was his partner, his listener, his advisor. When Daniel doubted himself, it was Maria who reminded him of his vision. When money was short, it was Maria who managed their home with resourcefulness. Every step of the company's growth carried her fingerprints, though no one else knew it. But then life shifted. Daniel fell ill, and within a few painful years, he was gone. His sudden death left Maria shattered. She had lost not just her husband, but also her place in the world they had built together. Lawyers and board members swarmed in after his passing, eager to take control. Contracts were pushed in front of her. Promises were made, but behind the polished words was a hunger for power. Maria signed only what was fair, keeping her rightful share of ownership intact, though most people in the company assumed she had disappeared into the shadows. And that was exactly what Maria wanted. She chose to step back, to vanish into a role no one would ever suspect. She had no desire to parade herself as the widow of the founder. She didn't need sympathy or pity. What she needed was the truth, the unfiltered truth about the company Daniel had loved. So, she made a bold decision. She applied for the lowest position in the building, under a different name, and quietly became the cleaning lady. It was not an act of desperation, but of purpose. She wanted to see how people truly behaved when they thought no one important was watching. She wanted to know if the company's values, the ones Daniel had once built it upon, still existed. And most of all, she wanted to see if the leaders respected the people beneath them. She believed that how they treated the lowest worker revealed everything about their character. Years passed. Maria worked silently, blending into the background, watching the company from the inside out. What she saw broke her heart. The vision she and Daniel had dreamed of had been corrupted by greed and arrogance. The CEO, who should have been a steward of Daniel's legacy, had turned the office into his personal stage. He mocked employees, wasted money, and built a culture of fear. And when he mocked Maria herself, without knowing who she truly was, it confirmed what she had long suspected. The company had lost its soul. Yet Maria did not reveal herself. Not yet. She waited. She collected evidence not on paper, but in her memory. Every cruel word, every careless decision, every act of arrogance, she stored them away like arrows in a quiver. She knew the right moment would come, and when it did, the truth would strike like lightning dot at night. When she went home to her small apartment, she would take out an old photo of Daniel. His smile reminded her of why she endured the humiliation day after day. "They think they are powerful," she whispered to the picture, "but they have no idea who they are laughing at. One day, Daniel, they will see. One day, justice will come." The hidden truth was that Maria was not powerless at all. She was the majority shareholder of the very company whose floors she scrubbed. She had the authority to change its course, to fire its leaders, to rewrite its story. But she wanted the revelation to be undeniable, unforgettable. If she had spoken up earlier, they would have dismissed her. They would have said she was a grieving widow, clinging to her past. But if she revealed herself after enduring their cruelty, after being ridiculed, humiliated, and treated as invisible, the shock would be greater. They would not be able to deny their arrogance, because she had given them every chance to show respect. And they had failed. Maria's secret was like a storm hidden behind calm skies. To the executives, she was just a cleaning lady. To the CEO, she was an easy target for jokes. But in reality, she was the one person who had the power to tear down their illusions. And soon, that hidden truth would come to light in the very room where they laughed at her. The ridicule had gone on for years, but there is always a moment when patience reaches its edge. For Maria, that moment came on a bright Monday morning, inside the boardroom she knew so well. The air was sharp with the scent of coffee, and the executives were gathered, their voices buzzing with chatter. Maria moved silently, as always, polishing the long table before the meeting began. She had nearly finished when the CEO walked in, his voice loud, his laughter louder. He stopped when he saw her still at work. Instead of waiting politely, he smirked and waved his hand as if she were a nuisance. "Really?" he said to the room, his voice dripping with mockery. "Every day she's here, wiping and scrubbing, yet this boardroom still stinks of failure. Maybe she should take over the company. She seems to be here more than any of us." The room burst into laughter. Some executives laughed nervously, not daring to stay silent while the CEO joked. Others chuckled openly, enjoying the cruel entertainment. Maria froze. Her hands still held the cloth, her eyes fixed on the table's reflection. For a moment, she felt like all the years of dignity she carried had been trampled into the floor. The CEO wasn't done. He leaned closer to her and added, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Do you even understand what happens in this room? Or do you just wipe the crumbs we leave behind?" The words cut deeper than the laughter. They were not just insults, they were an attempt to erase her humanity, to reduce her to nothing. Maria felt her chest tighten, her breath shallow. She kept her face calm, but inside, something was breaking. For years, she had endured their ridicule, reminding herself of her purpose. She had stayed silent, convincing herself that patience was strength. But this time, the laughter was too cruel, too loud, too humiliating. She could see the smirks, hear the mockery echoing in her mind. For the first time, Maria felt her silence tremble. She didn't speak. Not yet. Instead, she stood straighter, her cloth still in her hand, and met the CEO's eyes for the first time. It was only for a second, but it was enough to silence her own doubts. She saw him not as a powerful leader, but as a man drunk on arrogance, blind to the truth that stood before him. The meeting went on, but Maria could not shake the moment. As she left the boardroom, the sound of their laughter followed her down the hall like a cruel song. She walked into the janitor's closet, closed the door, and leaned against it. Her hands were trembling. She pressed them against her face, fighting back the tears. "Enough," she whispered to herself. Enough. Memories of her husband filled her mind, how he had believed in building a company with respect. How he treated every worker, from interns to partners, with dignity. If he had been alive to see what the company had become, his heart would have broken. And now Maria realized. She could not let his legacy die in the hands of men who laughed at suffering and mocked humility. That night, Maria sat at her small kitchen table, staring at the photo of Daniel. She lit a candle beside it, as she always did on difficult days. "They think I am powerless," she murmured, her voice steady now. "They think I am invisible. But they don't know who I am. They don't know what I hold in my hands." The breaking point was not just about humiliation, it was about clarity. For years, Maria had waited, unsure of when to reveal her truth. But now the moment was clear. Their cruelty had given her the reason, the fire, and the timing she needed. The next time she walked into that boardroom, she would not be carrying a mop. She would be carrying the weight of the truth and the power they never imagined she had. Maria's silence had been her weapon, her disguise, her shield. But at the breaking point, silence transformed into resolve. She no longer wished to endure. She wished to act. The same boardroom that had witnessed her humiliation would soon witness something no one could laugh at. And the man who mocked her most, the CEO himself, would discover that the authority to pull the ground right from under his feet. Asterisk. The boardroom had never been so silent. The long table gleamed under the soft lights, and the air carried the smell of fresh coffee, perfume, and nervous anticipation. The executives were already seated, their laptops open, their pens clicking impatiently. The CEO walked in last, as always, with his confident stride, grinning as if the entire company existed to orbit around him. He didn't know this meeting would change everything. None of them did. Then the doors opened again, and Maria stepped inside. But she was not wearing her faded cleaning uniform. Today, she was dressed in a sharp navy suit, her silver hair pinned neatly, her shoulders straight. She carried no mop, no cart, no bucket. Instead, she held a folder in her hand, thick with papers. The room froze. For a moment, no one recognized her. It was the CEO who spoke first, his voice carrying its usual edge of arrogance. "Excuse me, this is a private meeting." "Who let?" He stopped mid-sentence. His eyes widened as he realized who stood before him. The woman he had mocked, the one he called part of the furniture, was no longer invisible. She was commanding the room with her presence. Maria's voice was calm, steady, and sharp as glass. "Good morning, gentlemen," she said. "I won't take long before we begin. I believe it's time the truth came out." The executives exchanged confused glances. Some whispered, others stared openly, their eyes bouncing from her suit to her face. Trying to make sense of what they were seeing, Maria opened her folder and placed a set of documents on the table. "For years," she began, "I have watched this company from the ground up. I have seen every decision, every failure, every act of arrogance and cruelty. And I have remained silent until now." The CEO laughed nervously, trying to regain control. "This is ridiculous," he scoffed. "She's just enough." Maria cut him off. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that silenced the entire room. "I am not just anything. My name is Maria Alvarez. I am the widow of Daniel Alvarez, the man who founded this company. And I am also the majority shareholder. Which means, Mr. CEO, I have more power in this room than you could ever imagine." The silence was deafening. Some executives gasped. Others sat back in their chairs, stunned. The CEO's face drained of color. Maria continued, her words precise and unshakable. "I chose to work here as a cleaning lady not because I had to, but because I wanted to see the truth. I wanted to know how the people in this building treated those they believed were beneath them. And now I know. I have seen greed. I have seen arrogance. And I have seen a culture built on disrespect." Her eyes scanned the room, meeting each man's gaze. Some lowered their eyes in shame. Others looked frozen, unable to process what was happening. The CEO tried to laugh again, though his voice cracked. "This is outrageous. No one knew who you were because this isn't how things are done. If you were really, I don't need your approval to be who I am," Maria said sharply. She reached into her folder and pulled out the official papers, documents bearing her name and her ownership stake in the company. She slid them across the table. "Here is the proof. I am not here to beg for respect. I am here to claim what is mine, Kiev, and to protect the legacy my husband built." The CEO's hands trembled as he flipped through the documents. His jaw tightened, his arrogance slipping like a mask falling off. For once, he had no words. Maria leaned forward, her calm voice cutting through the heavy silence. "You mocked me. You ridiculed me in front of others. You encouraged a culture of cruelty. And you did it believing I was powerless. But today, the truth stands in front of you. I am not powerless. I am your boss." The room erupted not with laughter this time, but with gasps and murmurs. The executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats, realizing how gravely they had misjudged her. For years, Maria had walked silently among them, collecting every insult, every careless word, every arrogant laugh. Now, she was no longer invisible. She was the storm breaking through the silence, the truth crashing against the walls of arrogance. The CEO sank back into his chair, his confidence gone. For the first time in his reign, he looked small. The cleaning lady he had mocked had just revealed herself as the most powerful person in the room, and in that moment, Maria knew. The boardroom that had been a place of humiliation was now her stage of justice. The revelation was complete. Nothing in the company would ever be the same again.